2 weeks before my sister's wedding, my mother took me to lunch at a chain restaurant, waited for the breadsticks to land, and told me I was not invited. Those were almost her exact words. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand like she was doing me a kindness, and said, "Honey, we need to talk about the wedding. You're not going to be there. It's what Chloe wants, and I need you to be mature about it." I sat there with my fork in the air, 27 years old, listening to my own mother explain, in her soft, reasonable voice, that my only sister, my best friend since the day I was born, wanted me nowhere near the biggest day of her life. No reason that survived daylight. Just, you understand how you two get, and it's her day, not yours. And please don't call her about this. She's under enough stress. Please don't call her. Hold on to that sentence. Of everything my mother said at that table, that is the one that should have set off every alarm I own. And instead, I paid for our lunch, drove home, and cried in a parking garage for 40 minutes. Now come with me to 11 days later. 3 days before the wedding, 7 in the morning, someone is knocking on my apartment door like the building is on fire. And through my peephole, I see my mother, the same woman, mascara already down her face, my father sitting out in the car behind her staring at his own hands, and when I open the door, the first words out of her mouth are, and I quote, "Baby, we need $38,000 by Friday. You're the only one who has it. The daughter who was not invited. The daughter who, according to the family, was still playing on her computer and going nowhere. That daughter was suddenly, at 7 in the morning, the only human being on earth who could save the wedding she was banned from." And friends, here is the sentence I need you to carry into this whole story because it is the engine of everything. The reason I was banned and the reason they were broke turned out to be the same reason, not shame, fear. Let me make you 3 promises before we go back to the beginning so you know exactly what you are staying for. First, you are going to find out the real reason my name got scratched off that guest list, and it had nothing to do with my sister and everything to do with what I would have noticed, because in my family, I am not the successful one or the pretty one. I am the one who reads the paperwork. Second, you are going to be on the phone with me when I called the wedding venue, pretending to be someone I am not, and heard a stranger explain politely, in vendor language, exactly what happened to the $52,000 wedding fund my father had been telling everyone was handled. That call took 11 minutes. It rearranged my entire childhood. Third, there is a rehearsal dinner in this story, and I walked into it with a cashier's check in my purse and one condition attached to it, and what I said standing next to a tower of untouched bruschetta took less than 2 minutes, and it split my family cleanly into before and after. You will hear every word. If you have ever been the scapegoat at a table full of people you would still take a bullet for, do one thing for me before we start. Tap that like button, subscribe if these stories keep you company, and tell me in the comments what your family calls your job. Mine called mine a phase. The phase is how they made the mortgage twice, but we will get there. My name is Becca. I am 27 years old, and this is the story of how getting uninvited to a wedding turned out to be the loudest confession my father ever made. Stay with me. Every locked guest list in this story gets opened. To understand any of it, you need the family map, and I can draw it fast because I have had my whole life to study it. There are 4 of us. My father, Russ, who owns a small commercial cleaning company, 11 employees, a man made entirely out of firm handshakes and the phrase, "It's handled." My mother, Pam, whose whole career is being married to my father's version of events. And then the 2 daughters, Chloe, 3 years older, and me. And here is where my story goes sideways from the ones you are used to on this channel, so listen close. Chloe is not the villain. I need you to lock that in early because for about 40 minutes of this story it is going to look otherwise, and I remember the comment section. Chloe is a labor and delivery nurse who cried at my college rejection harder than I did. Chloe drove 4 hours in a snowstorm when my appendix came out. The golden child thing was never something she did. It was something that was done to both of us, by two parents who needed one daughter to be the trophy and one to be the warning, and they cast us at birth, and neither of us auditioned. Chloe got, "Look at your sister." I got, "What are we going to do with you?" And what they were going to do with me became the family's favorite topic the year I dropped out of state college sophomore year, because I had discovered two things. One, that I could not afford it without loans that scared me, and two, that I was already making real money doing the thing my father called clicking around. I taught myself to code at 19, friends. Websites first, then apps, then the boring, beautiful stuff nobody at a family dinner wants to hear about. Automations and databases for mid-sized companies that will pay very serious money for a person who shows up, does not lie, and hits deadlines. By 27, I was billing more in a year than my father's cleaning company cleared, and I could work from a laptop in my apartment, in leggings, with my hair in a bun. And that, friends, that last part, is what convicted me. Because in my family, success is not a number, it is a costume. My father wears logo polo shirts and drives a truck with his company's name on the doors. That is success. Chloe wears scrubs. That is sacrifice. And I wear leggings and no commute, so I was, and I quote my father at 3 separate Thanksgivings, still figuring it out. Nobody ever asked what I billed. Not once, not one person, in 8 years. The closest anyone came was my mother asking every few months, in her worried voice, if I was keeping up with my car payment. My car was paid off in cash, friends. The worry was not information seeking. The worry was the role they had written for me, being performed at me, on schedule, the way you water a plant. And I let them keep the story. Partly because correcting your family's version of you costs more energy than living your actual life. And partly, if I am honest, for the same reason every quiet one in these stories keeps the secret. Their picture of me was so wrong it had become a kind of privacy. I could sit at the kids' end of a dinner table, listen to my father explain compound interest incorrectly to my cousin, and feel like a spy in my own family, and some nights that felt lonely, and some nights, friends, I will not lie to you, it felt like power. There was exactly one job my invisible skill set ever got me in that family, and I need you to pay attention to it, because it is the hinge this whole story swings on. 4 years ago, my father's company got into a mess with a payroll service, double withdrawals, penalties, a real knot, and my father, who would sooner die than hire an accountant to look at his books, needed it fixed quietly. And my mother said, and I heard her say it through the kitchen door, "Well, have Becca look. She's good with computers." So Becca looked. I spent 9 evenings inside my father's business accounts, friends, and I fixed the payroll knot, and my father gave me a $100 bill and told me not to mention the mess to anyone. And I did not. And here is what I never told him. You cannot spend 9 evenings inside a man's books without learning the man. And what I learned 4 years ago was that my father's company, the It's Handled company, the Logo Polo company, ran month to month on a wire so thin it hummed. One slow quarter from real trouble. I filed it away and said nothing. Remember that I knew. Because he remembered, friends. He never forgot for one single day that I was the only person in that family who had ever seen behind the logo. And 3 years later, when the money started disappearing, the first thing he did was figure out how to get the auditor out of the building. And before the wedding machinery starts, I owe you the mortgage story. Because I promised it in the first minute, and because you cannot weigh what they did to me without knowing what I had already quietly done for them. Twice, friends. The first time was 4 years ago, the same season as the payroll knot. 9 evenings inside my father's books, remember. And on evening 6, I found something I had not been looking for, a home equity line on my parents' house, drawn almost to the cap, and 2 mortgage payments in a row returned for insufficient funds, quietly rerun days later. My parents were 3 months from real trouble on the house I grew up in, and nobody had said one word at one dinner. So here is what the daughter in the leggings did. I could not just hand my father money. Friends, you understand that by now the logo would sooner burn than be rescued by the phase. So I laundered my own kindness. I invented a story about a client who needed cleaning services for a small office park, a real client of mine, a real building, and I called my father and told him I had recommended his company and that the contract paid $2,200 a month and all he had to do was service it. The contract was real. The rate was not. The real rate was $1,200. Friends, and every month for over 2 years, 1,000 invisible dollars flowed from my consulting account through that invoice into my father's business, and from there into the mortgage that nobody was allowed to know was wobbling. He serviced that office park with pride. He put the client's name on his little website. He told people at church about the contract his reputation had earned, and I sat in the pew and said nothing, because the point was never credit, friends. The point was the house. 26 months. $26,000, give or take, moved through a fiction so my father could keep the story where he saves us. The second time was simpler and worse. 2 years ago, my mother called me, voice bright as tinfoil, and said, "Sweetie, this is silly, but the roof over the kitchen is leaking and the man wants $4,000 and it's just a bad month. Tax timing, you know how it is, could we?" And I said yes before she finished. And I drove over with a check. And here is the detail that stayed with me. The check was made out to cash, at her request. And when I handed it over at the kitchen table, my mother took it, thanked me in a whisper, and then said, "We won't mention this to your father. It would just upset him." And friends, at the time I filed that under pride, his pride, protected by her, one more shift at the laundry. It was only later, folder in hand, that I understood what I had actually seen. There was no roof leak. I checked, friends, of course I eventually checked, I am me. That $4,000 went to the same hungry mortgage, which means my mother knew the house was wobbling and carried that secret alone inside her marriage, the exact same way my father later carried the wedding fund. 2 people in one bed, each laundering a different fear, neither one ever once saying the true number out loud to the other. That is the house I grew up in, friends. Not a house of liars exactly. A house of performers, married to each other's audiences, and both of them, hear this, both of them knew exactly which daughter's door you knock on when the performance runs out of money. 7 in the morning is only shocking if you don't know the history. I had been my family's silent bank for 4 years. The only new thing that October morning was the size of the withdrawal, and the fact that, for the first time, I made the loan come with terms, and one more exhibit from the childhood file. Quick, because it explains the terms. When I was 16, I found a mistake on my parents' cell phone bill, a real one, $90 of charges for a line we did not have, and I called the company myself, sat on hold for an hour, got it fixed, got a credit, and came to dinner proud as a spelling test. And my father looked at the credit on the next bill and looked at me, and what he said, friends, in front of everyone was, "Well, aren't you the little detective? Nobody likes a kid who goes through the mail." The little detective, for finding his $90. And Chloe, 17, kicked me under the table in solidarity, and my mother said, "Russ," in the tone that polishes rather than stops, and the lesson landed exactly the way lessons land at 16. Being right about numbers in this family was a personality flaw. So I took the flaw underground, friends, and it grew there, the way underground things do, 27 floors of it. And on the morning my parents finally came to withdraw from the vault they had spent a lifetime mocking, the vault, it turned out, had developed a door policy. That is the mortgage story. Twice they were saved by the phase. 0 times did anyone ask the phase how it was doing. Keep it in your pocket, friends. The rehearsal dinner is coming, and now you know exactly how much unbilled history was standing next to that bruschetta. Now, the wedding. Chloe got engaged to Evan a year and a half ago, and I want to give you Evan quickly because he matters at the end. Pediatric physical therapist, laughs at his own jokes before the punchline, treats my sister like the last good parking spot on earth, the kind of man who texts you back in full sentences. I approved on site, and Chloe and I spent the whole first month of that engagement the way sisters are supposed to, on my couch with wine and a shared laptop, building a fantasy seating chart and rating dresses out of 10. Lock that image in, friends. Me and Chloe, one couch, one laptop, planning her wedding together. Because 11 months later, my mother would be telling me, over breadsticks, that this same sister wanted me erased from the day entirely. And the truly insane part, the part I am still in therapy about, is that I believed it. You want to know how the scapegoat brain works? Friends, here it is in one sentence. When someone tells you the person you love most is done with you, you do not question the evidence. You question what you did. And my mother knew that about me. She loaded that lunch with exactly the ammunition my particular guilt runs on. You two had that fight about the bachelorette budget, remember? And Chloe felt like you made the dress fitting about your opinions. And she has just been feeling like your energy lately is a lot. And friends, every single item on that list was a real event, sanded and repainted. There was a bachelorette conversation, where I had offered to cover the beach house so the broke bridesmaids would not drown, and Chloe had said, "You don't have to fix everything with money, Beck," which stung, and which I now understand was my sister, quoting a sermon she had been hearing about me at Sunday dinners I was not attending. The paint job had a factory, friends. We will tour the factory later. So when my mother said, "Please don't call her, she's under enough stress," my guilt swallowed it whole. I did not call my sister. For 11 days, the two of us sat in the same city, each believing a curated lie about the other. And if this story teaches one mechanical lesson, let it be this one. The move is always don't call her. Whoever benefits from the two of you not comparing notes is the author of the whole thing. Every time, friends, every family. Don't call her is not a request, it is a firewall, and I sat obediently behind it and grieved. And now let me show you what the disinvite looked like from the other side, because I got all of it later. From Chloe, in a parking lot, both of us shaking. 11 days before the wedding, my mother took Chloe to the same chain restaurant. Same booth for all I know. And told my sister that I had decided not to come. That I was jealous and overwhelmed. And honestly, sweetie, you know how Becca gets about money things. She said something about not wanting to watch you all burn cash on one day. I think it's best if we just love her from a distance right now. And here it is, friends. The mirror image, word for word. Please don't call her. She needs space. 2 daughters, 1 mother, 2 matching lies with the same firewall bolted onto the end, and the wedding rolled forward with a hole in the guest list shaped exactly like me, and everyone was told a story where the hole was somebody else's decision. My father's fingerprints are nowhere on any of this yet, you notice. Stay patient, friends. The quiet ones in the story are never who the story is about. I learned that from being one. So why, you are asking? Why did 2 parents perform surgery on their own daughter's relationship 2 weeks before a wedding? What was worth that? $38,000 was worth that. Here is what was happening backstage, assembled later from bank records, vendor emails, and one very honest venue owner. And friends, I want you to watch the dates, because the dates are the confession. The wedding fund was real. $52,000, saved over years. Some of it Chloe's own contributions from nursing overtime, most of it my parents' pledge, all of it parked in a joint account my father managed, because my father manages, that is his whole personality, it's handled. 8 months before the wedding, my father's company lost its biggest contract, a property management group that was 40% of his revenue, gone in one email. I told you about the humming wire. The wire snapped. And my father, faced with a choice between telling his family the truth and performing solvency, chose the performance. Because in my family, the logo is the last thing you are allowed to lose. He made payroll out of the wedding fund in March. He caught up a business loan out of it in April. By June, friends, the $52,000 account held $6,100, and the wedding, the venue balance, the caterer, the band, the flowers, all of it was riding on postponed invoices and my father's handshake. and he was juggling vendors the way he had juggled that payroll years ago, promising, delaying, moving small amounts at deadlines, robbing June to gaslight July. And then the venue changed the rules. The Marlowe house, the big white estate Chloe had loved since high school, got bought out last spring by a hospitality group, and the new management sent every client a notice. Final balances now due in full 10 days before the event. Certified funds only. No exceptions. Any account not settled 72 hours out forfeits the date and the deposits. $38,000, friends. Due in full in certified funds on a hard deadline from a man who had $6,000 and a logo. Now, do the math I did not get to do until it was almost too late. That notice went out 2 weeks and 2 days before the wedding. My lunch of the breadsticks was 2 weeks before the wedding. My father learned the exact size and date of the iceberg, and within 48 hours, the one person in the family who had ever been inside his books, the one person who asks what happened to the account, the one person who reads paper for a living, was surgically removed from every room the wedding would happen in. The bachelorette, the rehearsal, the reception tables where aunts gossip about money, all of it gone, and both daughters firewalled from comparing notes, all in one clean lunch. Because think about what I would have seen, friends. At any wedding event, some vendor makes a joke about final payments. Some coordinator pulls my parents aside, some aunt asks why Russ looks gray, and Becca, the human audit, starts pulling one thread. He did not ban me because I would embarrass the family. He banned me because I would understand it. Fear, friends. Fear wearing etiquette as a coat, and my mother stitched the coat. And I want to be careful here, because it took me months to get the shape of her pot right. My mother did not know the money was gone. Write that down before you sharpen anything for her. What my mother knew was that Russ said the wedding needed less drama and fewer variables, and that keeping his version of events is the only job she has ever had. And so she went out and did the surgery he suggested with the skill of 40 years of practice. And if you asked her, then or now, she would tell you she was protecting everyone. There is a certain kind of marriage, friends, where one person launders the other's fear into etiquette, full-time, unpaid, for decades. That is my mother's whole resume. The comments can decide what to charge her. I have decided what I charge her, and you will hear it at the end. Now let me take you through my 11 days in exile, because they matter, and because one of them contains the moment I should have caught everything and almost did. The first 3 days, I did what banished sisters do. I drafted 40 text messages to Chloe and sent none of them because, please don't call her, she's under enough stress. I cried in the shower, worked 60 billable hours to outrun my own head, and reread every message thread Chloe and I had, looking for the crime and finding only 2 sisters who liked each other. That not finding, friends, that was the splinter. Because I know what my fights with Chloe look like. We have had 30 years of them. They are loud, they are fast, and they end with somebody showing up with tacos. Silent surgical exile is not her language. It was someone else's accent coming out of her mouth, and some animal part of me knew it, and the guilt kept shouting the animal down. I should also show you what exile looks like in the age of the phone, friends, because our grandmothers got banished and then got silence, and silence, whatever else it is at least dark. I got banished with the lights on. Day 4 of my 11 days was the bachelorette weekend. The beach house I had once offered to pay for, friends, remember? The offer that got repainted into evidence against me. And I knew the weekend was happening because I know my sister's friends, and I made a decision that I stand by and do not recommend. I did not mute anyone. So it came to me live, all Saturday, story by story. The bridesmaids on the deck in matching shirts. The toast somebody filmed at golden hour. Chloe laughing in the middle like the sun had a favorite. A group photo, 11 women arranged on porch steps. And friends, I want to tell you what I did with that photo, because it is the single most pathetic thing in this story and therefore the most honest. I zoomed in on the gap. There was a spot on the second step next to Chloe where the arrangement went slightly wide, the kind of gap a photographer leaves without knowing why, and I sat on my couch at 11 at night looking at a hole in a photograph thinking, that was mine. That gap is where I live now. And here is the detail that only made sense after the folder. Chloe posted nothing all weekend, friends. Every picture I saw came from the bridesmaids. My sister, at her own bachelorette, was not performing joy anywhere I might see it, and at the time I read it as guilt about banning me, and it broke my heart in one direction, and the truth, when I got it, broke it in the other. She was quiet because she missed me, and could not say so because she had been told I chose the absence. Two women, one gap, both grieving it, both firewalled, friends, and somewhere across town, the architect of the whole thing was refreshing his email to see if the venue had blinked yet. Day 8 brought the aunts. You knew the aunts were coming. My Aunt Robin, my mother's sister, tribune of the family group chat, sent me a text that I have preserved, and I will read it to you complete, because it is a masterpiece of the genre. It said, Becca honey, I'm not taking sides, but your mom is beside herself that you're skipping the wedding, whatever this is about. Is it really worth breaking your mother's heart over? Family is everything. Also, are you still doing computer stuff? Dale's grandson needs a website for his lawn care. Friends. Not taking sides, delivered entirely from one side, a diagnosis of a crime I was the victim of, a bill for my mother's performance of grief, and an invoice for free labor, all in one text, with a lawn care website on the end like a garnish. I am framing the whole era, honestly, and I answered it the way the exiled learned to answer. One line, no fuel. I said, there's more to this than you've been told, and I hope someday you ask about it. And Aunt Robin replied, see, this is what I mean. Everything is always so complicated with you. There it is, friends. The whole machine in 11 words. The scapegoat's crime is never the facts. The facts are always so complicated. The golden story is simple. That is its entire qualification. Simple travels, complicated stays home, and the family repeats whatever fits in a text message, and that exact mechanism is how a lie with two authors gets 40 co-signers by Friday. And day 10, friends. The last exhibit of the exile, the one that still catches me at odd hours. A padded envelope in my mail, no note, from my mother. Inside, bubble-wrapped, was a china teacup, one of the set with the yellow roses that lived in the high cabinet my whole childhood, the set Chloe and I were always promised we would split someday. One cup, no note, and I stood at my mailbox holding it, trying to translate, because it was either an apology or a payment, or a farewell, or all three, and with my mother there is never a note. The objects are the note. You spend your whole life doing translation for people who refuse to speak the language of saying things. After the folder, I asked her about it at one of our Tuesday lunches, months later. I said, Mom, the teacup, day 10, what was it? And my mother looked at her salad for a while, and then she said quietly, you were being erased and I couldn't stop it, so I sent you proof you were still in the family. I didn't have the words, so I sent the china. Friends, I have decided to believe her, not because I am certain, because the cup exists, and the words finally do too. And at some point, in every family that is trying, you stop auditing intentions and start banking behavior. The cup sits on my desk. I drink my deadline coffee out of it. Every sip is complicated, and I have made my peace with complicated. It is, after all, what I am known for. Day 6 is the one I want to walk you through slowly. Day 6, my mother called me. Warm as anything, like the breadsticks had never happened, and she asked me for a favor. She said, Sweetie, since you're not coming, and since things are so tight for everybody these days, would you consider putting your gift toward the honeymoon fund now instead of later? It would mean so much. Even 1,000 would help them so much. Friends, sit with the anatomy of that phone call. The daughter too toxic to occupy a chair for 5 hours was not too toxic to wire money in advance. And my mother saw no contradiction because in the family operating system that request is coherent. Becca's presence, costly. Becca's money, clean. I said I would think about it. And then I did the thing that changed everything, and I did it for a stupid, petty, human reason, and I will confess it plainly. I decided that if I was going to send a gift, I was going to send it to a vendor directly because I did not trust the honeymoon fun story, not because I suspected my father, friends. I want to be honest, I had not gotten there yet. I did not trust it because being exiled makes you paranoid about exactly the wrong things, and I thought my mother might skim my gift into wedding overruns, and I wanted my money to land somewhere with Chloe's name on it, visible, so that after the dust settled, my sister would know I had shown up in the only way I was allowed to. Pettiness, friends. Remember this the next time you are ashamed of yours? Mine cracked the whole case, because on day 7 I called the Marlowe house. I had the venue coordinator's name from the couch and laptop era, back when I was still allowed to know things, a brisk, kind woman named Renee, and I called her office and said, "Hi, I'm calling about the Hartman wedding this Saturday. I'm the bride's sister. I'd like to make a payment toward their account as a surprise gift." And there was a pause. Friends, you know the kind. The pause where a stranger on a phone is deciding how much of your family's blood to show you. And Renee said, carefully, in that trained vendor voice, "Well, I think that's a lovely thought, and I want to be delicate here, but any payment would be very welcome, because as of this morning, the account is scheduled for cancellation review on Wednesday." I said cancellation review. She said the final balance was due Monday under the new ownership policy, certified funds. "We have been trying to work with your father for 2 weeks, he has been, and here she chose her word the way you step on river rocks. Optimistic. But ownership doesn't bend on this anymore, honey. If 38,000 isn't settled by Wednesday at 5, the date releases, and there's a wait list for that ballroom, and I would hate," she said, and her voice stopped being a vendor for 1 second, "I would hate for that sweet nurse to lose her venue 3 days out over whatever is going on." 11 minutes, friends. I asked 4 more questions, good ones, auditor ones, and Renee, God bless her forever, answered every single one like a woman leaving a door unlocked on purpose. The deposits, paid on time, a year ago, from the joint account. The payment plan, current until 5 months ago. Then late, then partial, then in the last 2 weeks, nothing but calls from my father asking for extensions with the confidence of a man asking for extra napkins. I hung up and sat very still at my desk for a long time. Friends, and I want to describe to you exactly what happened in my chest in that silence, because it happened in this order, and the order matters. First, vertigo, the floor of the story I had been living in just gone. Then, and I am not proud of the speed of this one, relief, hot and shameful, because if the money was the crisis, then Chloe never exiled me. The exile was scaffolding around a lie. My sister still loved me. I could breathe. And third, arriving late and cold and thorough, the auditor. Because I know my father's business calendar the way Renee knows her ballroom, I had been inside those books, and the words final balance due plus the words 2 weeks of optimism plus the memory of a humming wire snapped together into one machine, and I stood up at my desk and said, out loud, alone, to my monitor, "He spent the wedding fund." And then, 1 heartbeat later, the second half, the half that turned my grief into something with edges. That's why I'm not invited. Friends, I want to freeze this frame because I know what half of you are shouting at the screen right now. Call Chloe. Call her right now. Blow the firewall. Sound the alarm. And I want you to understand why I did not yet, not that hour, because this is the part of me the story turned on. If I called Chloe with nothing but a vendor's hints and my gut, here is what happens in my family. My father says, "Becca has always resented this wedding. Look at her, banned for her behavior and now inventing money drama for attention. And my mother backs the performance, and the paint factory runs 1 more shift, and the exile becomes permanent. And maybe the wedding still collapses on Wednesday anyway, with everyone blaming me for the smoke." You do not bring your family a suspicion, friends, not when you are the scapegoat. Scapegoats do not get the benefit of the doubt, so scapegoats bring receipts or bring nothing. So I spent the next 2 days being what they always mocked, the girl on her computer. Public records for my father's company, the contract loss was traceable, a lien filed by a supplier in April, small claims from a subcontractor, all public, all dateable. The venue policy notice, forwarded to me by Renee, sweet felon that she is, when I asked if there was documentation a family member could review. Even the joint account, friends, because 4 years ago, fixing that payroll knot, I had been given view access to the business dashboard, and nobody had ever revoked it. And I logged in with an old password on the second try and watched, in cold blue bank interface light, the wedding fund drain in 11 withdrawals between March and June, each one landing in the business account within a day of a payroll date. He had not even hidden it, friends. That is the detail I keep coming back to. No shell games, no cash, just transfer after transfer in plain sight, because it never once occurred to my father that anyone in his family would ever look, because looking was my job, and he had already fired me from the family for it. I printed everything. 31 pages, 3 copies, 1 red folder each because yes, friends, a folder, this channel has a uniform and I wear it proudly. And on day 9, with 72 hours left on Renee's clock, I was sitting at my kitchen table deciding exactly how to detonate this when someone knocked on my apartment door like the building was on fire. 7 in the morning. My mother, mascara down her face. My father in the car, studying his hands. Baby, we need $38,000 by Friday. You're the only one who has it. They beat me to my own reveal, friends. And the story they told me standing in my doorway, oh, you need to hear the story. Because even drowning, even begging, my parents led with fiction. Here is the version of events my mother delivered in my doorway at 7 in the morning, while my coffee maker gurgled behind me like a laugh track. There had been, she said, a terrible mix-up with the venue's new owners, some computerized billing error, you know how these corporate systems are, and the account showed a shortfall, and of course Daddy is disputing it, but disputes take time, and the wedding is Saturday, and the cruel people want certified funds by Wednesday, and everything Daddy has is tied up in the business right now. Equipment, invoices. You know how business is, sweetie. It's all timing. And Chloe cannot find out because it would destroy her week. And so, and here her voice did the swoop, we thought of you. You're doing so well with your little contracts lately, aren't you? Could you help your sister? Friends, let us admire the architecture for 1 second, because I had 2 days of receipts in a red folder 8 feet away. And listening to that speech was like watching someone give a museum tour of a building you personally set on fire. A billing error, a dispute. Tied up, timing, and Chloe cannot find out. The firewall again, load-bearing to the very end. And your little contracts. Even the beg was seasoned with the diminutive, friends. Even on their knees, the file on me stayed open on the table. I want to tell you exactly what I felt, because this is the moment the whole channel exists for, and it was not what I expected to feel. I expected rage, and rage was present. But the loudest thing in my chest, I swear this to you, was a terrible, specific sadness, because my mother was standing in my doorway, lying to my face with real tears in her eyes, which meant one of 2 things. Either she knew and had chosen the performance over me one more time, or, and this turned out to be the truth, she was performing a script she had never checked, delivering my father's fiction with her whole believing heart. One more shift at the laundry. Both options grieved me. Only one of them was fixable, so I did not open the red folder. Not yet. Instead, I asked one question, and I asked it looking past her, at the car, at the man studying his hands behind the windshield. I said, Mom, why isn't he the one at my door? And my mother blinked and did the thing she has done at every hard moment of my life. She answered a different, easier question. Sweetie, he's just so stressed. This venue thing has him. And I held up my hand gently and I said, No, I'll ask him myself. Tell him to come in. Both of you, there's coffee. Friends, my father crossed my apartment threshold for the second time in the 4 years I had lived there, and the first time was to drop off a chair. He came in wearing the logo polo, because of course he did. Armor is armor, and he sat at my kitchen table and let my mother do the talking the way a man lets an airbag do the crashing, and I poured 3 coffees, and I set them down, and then I went to my desk drawer, and I came back and I set the red folder on the table next to the sugar. Nobody in the history of kitchen tables has ever looked at a folder the way my father looked at that folder. And I said, before anyone says the phrase billing error to me again, I want you both to know what is in there. The venue's payment policy notice, dated. The lien from your supplier, dated. 11 transfers out of the wedding account, dated, sized, and matched to your payroll Fridays, because you never revoked my dashboard access, Dad. 4 years, and you never once changed the locks on the books, because it never crossed your mind that the girl would come back in. Silence, friends. The coffee maker finished and clicked off, loudest click in North America. And I watched my mother's face during that silence, because I was learning something in real time. And here is what I learned. She had not known. The shortfall she had known about for 2 weeks. That was the surgery's real date. But the cause, the 11 transfers, the payroll Fridays, the $6,100 left of her daughter's wedding fund that landed on her at my kitchen table between the sugar and the folder, and I watched 20 years of laundered fear come due on her face all at once. She turned to my father, and she said his name once, just his name, Russ, in a voice I had never heard her use, the voice from before I existed, maybe the voice from whoever she was before the laundry, and my father, friends. My father looked at his coffee, and his hands went around the mug the way they had gone around the steering wheel, and the logo polo emptied out right in front of me, and out of what was left came the truest thing the man has ever said in my presence. He said, I was going to fix it before anyone noticed. I have always fixed it before anyone noticed. That is the whole job of being me. And then quieter, to the coffee, not to us. The only person who ever notices things in this family is Becca. That is why. He could not finish the sentence, friends. So I finished it for him, level, no blade in it, just the fact finally out on the table in the light. That is why I wasn't invited. And my father nodded at his coffee. Once. And that nod, friends, that 1 centimeter of honesty, is the only reason everything that happened afterward was repair instead of demolition. And I want to be fair and hang it in the record. It is not an apology. We will get to the apology. But a confession is the door an apology walks through, and at 7:40 in the morning at my kitchen table, the door opened 1 centimeter, and I decided in that moment exactly what I was going to do, and it surprised even me. If you are still with me, friends, this is the moment. Tap that like button, because what I said next at that table is the thing I would go back and tell 20-year-old me is coming, and she would never believe it. I said, here is what happens now. I have the 38,000. That is not in question, and we are all going to skip the part where anyone at this table acts surprised that the girl with the little contracts has it, because the acting has been the whole problem. I will pay the Marlowe house myself directly today, certified funds, my name on the receipt. Not a loan to you, Dad. Not a rescue of you. A gift to Chloe and Evan from her sister, which is what it would have been anyway. Roughly, someday, this just moved up the schedule. But it comes with one condition, and the condition is not negotiable. And Mom, you need to hear this part with your whole chest. Chloe hears the truth before she walks down that aisle. All of it. The transfers, the exile, both lunches, both firewalls, every don't call her, from him, his mouth, his words, in person, with me in the room, by Thursday night at the rehearsal dinner, or I stand up at that dinner with my copy of the folder and do it myself. And Dad, look at me, you have known me for 27 years. Tell them whether I will do it. And my father looked up from his coffee for the first time since the folder hit the table, and he looked at me for a long, strange moment. And friends, I truly did not know what was going to come out of him. And what came out was this. He said you would. You have always been the one who would. And then he exhaled 40 years of it, some of it mine, most of it his, and he said, "All right, Becca, Thursday." And my mother whispered, "Russ, the guests?" And he said, without looking at her, "Pam, enough. We already lost one daughter's whole childhood to enough." And friends, I had to get up and rinse a mug that was already clean because the auditor was crying, and there is no column for that. Now, between the folder hitting my kitchen table and the check hitting Renee's desk, there were about 5 hours, and I want to show you two of them, because the decision you watched me announce did not arrive smooth, friends. It arrived out of a war council. The moment my parents' car left my lot, I called the two people who function as my board of directors, my best friend Priya from my college year, who is a divorce attorney now, which is a fact I need you to savor, and Marcus, my first ever big client, 60-something, retired operations guy, who took one look at my work 8 years ago and appointed himself my professional grandfather without filing any paperwork. Conference call, 3 ways, me pacing my kitchen with cold coffee. I laid it all out, the exile, the folder, the 72 hours, the 38,000. And then I asked the board for options. And friends, the board split immediately. And the argument they had is the argument half of you are having in the comments right now. So let us have it properly. Priya voted scorched earth. She said, "And I love her for it, Beck. Listen to me. You owe these people a lawyer's letter, not a ransom payment. Do nothing. Let the venue cancel. The wedding collapses on exactly the person who spent the money. The truth comes out on its own schedule. Chloe learns everything. You are standing clean at a safe distance, and your family finally experiences one single consequence at full price. You did not break this, and every dollar you spend fixing it teaches them the break is free." And friends, I want to be honest with you the way I promised at the start. That speech had a taste, and the taste was good. There is a version of me that hangs up, mutes my phone for 4 days, and lets the performance run out of stage, and that version is not evil, friends. Do not let anyone tell you she is. She is just tired, and she is owed. But then Marcus, who had been quiet the whole time, doing the thing he does, asked me one question. He said, "Kid, walk it forward. Saturday night, the wedding is canceled. Everything is out. Your father is destroyed. Your mother is destroyed. Fine. Maybe they earned it. Where is Chloe standing?" And friends, the whole scorched earth doctrine died in my kitchen in the length of that question, because I walked it forward and looked, and there she was, my sister, in a dress she cannot return, in a story she did not write, holding a cancelled wedding as the souvenir of her parents' marriage, and every guest she has ever known holding a piece of the gossip, and her wedding, friends, the one day that was supposed to be hers, converted permanently into the family crime scene. Scorched earth never burns, just the guilty. That is the whole problem with it as a strategy, and the whole reason it feels so good as a fantasy. Fire does not read folders. And I heard myself say, out loud, to the board, "No. The wedding is Chloe's. The consequences are Dad's." The mistake everyone in my family has made forever is treating those as one account, and I am the auditor. Friends, I do not commingle funds. I split them. The money goes to the venue, direct, my name on the receipt, so it can never be laundered into the legend of Russ handling things. And the truth goes to the rehearsal dinner, on a deadline, his mouth or my folder. And both things happen, and neither one cancels the other. And Priya, I could hear it, actually laughed and said, "There it is. That's the settlement I would have drafted. I just needed you to fight for it instead of me handing it over." Boards, friends, everybody in these stories needs 2 voices you trust, one that loves your anger and one that loves your aim. And the whole trick of surviving your own family is holding the meeting before you act instead of after. And Marcus said one more thing before we hung up, and it is the sentence I carried up the Marlowe House steps that afternoon, so I will leave it here where it belongs. He said, Kid, one more thing about the condition. When you make a man confess as the price of a rescue, you are not punishing him. You are betting he can survive being known. It is the most respect anyone has shown your father in 40 years. Do not let anybody at that dinner tell you it was cruelty. It was the first time somebody treated him like he could afford the truth. I sat with that at 3 red lights in a row. Friends. Then I got the cashier's check, and I put on the bun, and you know the rest of the afternoon. But I wanted you to see the 2 hours, because the internet loves to sort women like me into saints or avengers, and I was neither in that kitchen. I was a person with a folder, a sister, and one shot at aiming a disaster, and I called my people, and I walked it forward, and I aimed it. That is the whole secret, friends. Anger is information. Aim is a decision. I drove to the Marlowe house that same morning with a cashier's check and my hair in the bun of destiny, and I want to give you 90 seconds of that visit, because Renee deserves her scene. She met me in the office off the ballroom, took one look at the check, and then took a much longer look at me, and said, "The sister." I said, "The sister." And Renee, who has run weddings for 20 years and has therefore seen every species of family there is, processed that payment with the ceremony of a state funeral, stamped the receipt, slid it across, and then folded her hands and said, "Off the record, honey. In this business, you learn there is one in every family. The one the money hides behind, the one the trouble gets blamed on, and the one who shows up with certified funds when the wheels come off. And it is almost always the same one, and the family almost never knows it until a week like this one. Go get your seat back." I framed that receipt, friends. I am not telling you where it hangs, because you already know where it hangs. And then there was one call left to make, the one I had been forbidden from making for 11 days, and I sat in my car in the Marlowe house parking lot, under the oaks my sister had loved since high school, and I called Chloe, and when she picked up, she said my name like a question, Beck, and I said the sentence I had decided on. I said, "I never said I wasn't coming. Whatever you were told, I never said it. Are you sitting down?" Silence, friends. Then, so quiet, she said, "Mom said you didn't want to watch us burn money." And I said, "Mom told me you didn't want me there at all." And I listened to my sister do the exact vertigo I had done at my desk, the floor of her story going, and then Chloe, my Chloe, the taco bringer, said, "Where are you right now?" And 40 minutes later, she was in that parking lot still in her scrubs. And friends, what happened between the two of us under those oaks is mostly ours, but I will give you the shape of it. 2 sisters, 30 years of being cast in a play neither of us auditioned for, comparing scripts for the first time, line by line, lie by lie, don't call her by, don't call her. There was crying, and there was unexpectedly laughing, the unhinged kind, when we realized our mother had used the same restaurant, and Chloe kept saying, "The same booth." Beck, I swear it was the same booth. And there was one moment I will carry, when my sister grabbed both my hands and said, "I have been getting married for a year without my person, they took my person, and I know the wedding fun thing is the headline. But that is the crime. They took my person." Friends, whoever needs to hear this, the money is never the crime. The money is the evidence. The crime is always the person they took from you to cover it. I told her everything in that parking lot. The folder, the transfers, the deal, Thursday. And Chloe listened the whole way through, nurse steady, and at the end, she asked exactly one question, and it was not about the 38,000. She said, "Is Dad okay?" Because that is who my sister is, friends, and that is why every dollar of that check was already worth it. Thursday. The rehearsal dinner was at an Italian place downtown. 22 people, string lights, a tower of bruschetta nobody was touching because everybody could feel the barometric pressure coming off the head table. Evan's parents were there, lovely, bewildered people. Chloe knew what was coming. Evan knew, because Chloe and Evan are what my parents never were, one system with no laundry in it. My mother sat with her napkin folded to a knife edge, and after the salads, my father stood up. No glass tapping, and friends, Whatever you think a man like Russ sounds like when the logo finally comes off, adjust it downward, softer, older. He said, before tomorrow happens, this family has some truth to catch up on, and most of you only need the short version, which is, the money for this wedding got into trouble this spring. My trouble, my business, my doing, and my hiding. And it is fixed now, and it was not fixed by me. It was fixed by my daughter Becca, who a lot of you were told was not coming tomorrow. That was also my doing and my hiding, and it is the worst of the two. And if you want to know what kind of man tells his family a daughter is too much drama for a wedding she was quietly paying for, well, you're looking at him, and I would not blame you for looking a while. He turned to Chloe. He said, your sister never left you, sweetheart, not for one day. I moved her out of the way because she is the only one of us who was ever going to catch me. And friends, his voice went here, and he let it go in front of 22 people and a bruschetta tower. And he said, and God help me, catching me is exactly what she did. And then she saved your wedding anyway, with one condition, not the money back. This, me, standing here, saying it out loud, that was the whole price. The truth, at dinner, in front of everyone. And then my father, Russ, logo polo and all, looked down the table at me and said the apology, the real one, 11 words. And I will give it to you exactly, because I promised you would hear every word. He said, I spent your whole life calling you the problem. You were the audit. I'm sorry, Becca. That is 13 words. Friends, I have counted it 100 times. He went over budget, and it is the only overage of my father's I have ever been glad to carry. What happened next I can only report, because I was busy being held. Chloe got to me first, then Evan, then, of all people on this green earth, Evan's mother, a woman I had met 90 minutes earlier, who took my face in both hands and said, honey, I had one of you in my family too, my Aunt Dot. And nobody said the words out loud to her until her funeral, and I have never forgotten it, and I am so glad. I am so glad they said it to you at a dinner. And the bruschetta finally got eaten, friends. All of it. Grief gets tea in some families. In mine, apparently, appetizers. One more thing happened that night, and it belongs here at the hinge, before the wedding, because it is my mother's scene, and she chose the timing herself. She caught me at the coat rack, alone, at the end of the night. And my mother, who had spent the evening very quiet, folding and refolding the napkin, stood in front of me holding her coat like a shield, and she said, I need you to know I believed what I told you at that lunch. He told me it was best, and I believed it. I have spent my whole marriage believing it was best. That is, she stopped, and her chin went, and she said, Becca, I don't know how to know things the way you know things. Nobody ever taught me to look. And friends, I looked at my mother, 61 years old, one shift ending at a laundry she had worked her whole adult life, and I gave her the only true thing I had, and it was gentler than she expected and harder than she wanted. I said, Mom, you don't need to know how to look. You just have to stop repeating things you haven't looked at. That's the whole job. It's smaller than you think and bigger than you've ever done. And she nodded, the smallest nod in the world, her husband's nod, 1 centimeter, the family's whole currency of confession, and she put on her coat. And that, friends, is where my mother and I left it the night before the wedding. A door, open 1 centimeter. Some doors need decades. You hold them with your foot and you wait. The wedding was perfect, friends. And I mean that in the specific way this channel means it, not that nothing went wrong. The best man lost a cufflink into a floral arrangement and a flower girl went on strike at the worst moment, but that everything true went right. The Marlowe house glowed. Renee ran the day like a general with a secret soft spot, and every time she passed me she touched my shoulder, once, like checking a receipt. And I sat in the front row. Not the second, friends. The front, on the aisle, in a seat that had a card on it in my sister's handwriting, because Chloe had gone to the venue Friday morning, taken a place card, and written on it, in nurse block capitals, reserved for my person. I have that card. It lives in the frame with the receipt. The whole archive of that week fits in one frame, friends, a cashier's stub and a place card, $38,000 and 5 words, and I could not tell you which half of the frame cost more. Chloe was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. My father walked her down the aisle, and I watched him do it in a suit with no logo anywhere on it. A man one day out from the worst dinner of his life, holding his daughter's arm like a rope he had not earned. And here is the thing about consequences and grace arriving together. Friends, they do not cancel each other. They hold hands. Everybody at that ceremony who mattered knew exactly what he had done, and he walked her down the aisle anyway, wet-eyed and demoted and grateful. And that is what repair actually looks like. Not a reset. A man walking carefully in full view, on ground he knows he cracked. At the reception, during toasts, Chloe stood up with the microphone, thanked everyone for coming, thanked Evan's parents, and then she said, "There's one more person." And most of you know some version of this week's story by now, so I'll just say the true part. There was almost no wedding. And the person who saved it is the same person who was almost not in this room, and I want everyone to raise a glass to my little sister, Becca. The only guest this wedding could not have happened without. And 200 people stood up, friends, for the scapegoat. For the girl with the little contracts, in a room she was banned from 12 days earlier. And I stood there in the noise doing shoulders back arithmetic with my whole body. And I found Renee's eyes across the ballroom, and that woman raised a tray of empty glasses at me like a trophy. There are 3 more pieces of that wedding day I have to hand you before the ledger, friends, small ones, the kind the cameras miss. The first is the getting ready room. Chloe had asked me to be there Saturday morning, not as a bridesmaid. The party had been set for a year, and I would not let her detonate it 3 days out over me, but as what she called staff of the heart. And so I was in the room with the robes and the hairspray fog and the photographer crawling around like a combat journalist. And 20 minutes before the first look, my sister cleared the room. Everybody out, gently, just us. And Chloe stood there in the dress, and she took an envelope off the vanity and put it in my hands and said, "I was going to give you this at the reception, but I want to see your face, and I don't want witnesses. Because you'll make that face, and then I'll make mine, and the makeup lady already threatened us both." Inside was a card, and inside the card was the bracelet. Friends. Our grandmother's thin gold bracelet, the one Grandma left to Chloe specifically, the single most contested object of our whole childhood, the thing we had each tried on 100 times in Grandma's bathroom, and the card said, in nurse block capitals, "Something borrowed goes back. This doesn't. It was always supposed to be split. Consider the estate audited. Love, your person." Friends, the makeup lady had to come back in. For both of us. She threatened us again and fixed it all with a sponge and did not ask questions, because wedding vendors, I have learned this month, are the priesthood of family secrets. And I wore that bracelet through the whole ceremony, and I have not really taken it off since. And when I type invoices, it clicks against my laptop, click, click, tiny applause from a dead woman who, I am told, also read every piece of paper twice. The second piece is the dance. Late in the reception, after the sanctioned dances, the DJ played something old and slow, and my father crossed the parquet in his no-logo suit and stood in front of me and held out his hand and said, "I believe the problem child owes me a dance." And then he caught it, friends, caught his own reflex mid-air, first time I ever witnessed it, and he closed his eyes for a second and reopened them and said, "No. Let me run that again. I believe I owe my daughter a dance, about 30 years of them. And we danced, friends, badly. We are not dancing people. We are folder people. Both of us, it turns out. And about halfway through the song, my father said, quietly, over my head, not really to me, "You know what I keep thinking about? That cell phone bill. You were 16. I called you a detective like it was a dirty word. And you had just saved me $90, and I have been getting saved by you on and off for 11 years and calling it something else every single time." And I said into his shoulder, Because some things are easier said into shoulders. You're dancing with the detective now, Dad. It cost you 38 grand. And my father laughed. Friends, a real one. From under the logo. All the way from wherever they keep the boy they were before the performance started. And he said, cheapest audit I'll ever get. And the third piece is Renee. End of the night, sparkler send-off done, my feet in agony. I was hunting my other shoe under a table when Renee appeared with 2 coffees and sat down next to me in the wreckage like we had served together, which, friends, we had. And she said, you want to know the vendor secret, since you're practically one of us after this week. I said, obviously. And Renee looked out at the emptying ballroom, at the staff folding the night away, and she said, weddings don't show you who people are becoming. They show you who's been holding everything up all along. Every wedding, there's one, we spot them by Tuesday of wedding week, the one whose name is on nothing and inside everything. The aisle runner walks down the aisle, honey, but somebody paid for the floor. And she tapped her coffee against mine and got up and went back to running the world, and I sat under the string lights with my one shoe, 27 years old, bracelet clicking, thinking, put it on my grave, friends. Somebody paid for the floor. Then I found my shoe, and I went and danced with my sister until they turned the real lights on. And if the photographer caught anything worth keeping that night, it is that. 2 women who almost got taken from each other by a lie 11 days old and a script 30 years old, sweaty and laughing and loud, in a ballroom that came within 72 hours of being somebody else's Saturday. Nobody is posting that picture anywhere, friends. It hangs in the 2 of us. Best frame I own. Now, the ledger, because this channel always closes the books. The 38,000. My father insisted on repayment, and I refused, and we fought about it. Our first fight ever conducted entirely in respect, and the compromise is the best clause I have ever drafted. He pays $400 a month, not to me, into a college fund for Chloe and Evan's future kids. The account is in my name as custodian. The statements come to me, and every month, friends, every single month for the rest of his working life, my father sits down and writes a check to a future he almost bankrupted, processed and verified by the daughter he called the problem. He has never missed one, 26 months and counting. And the memo line on the first check, in his blocky contractor handwriting, said, audited and approved. The business. He let it shrink, friends, which for a man like Russ is a bigger confession than the dinner was. 7 employees now instead of 11, no more juggling, and a real accountant, an actual licensed human named Diane who calls me twice a year to compare notes, at his instruction, because, quote, Becca will catch it anyway, might as well save a step. The lien is cleared. The wire still hums. Friends, small business wires always hum, but nobody performs solvency at family dinners anymore, and when a quarter is bad, he says so, out loud, at the table. And the first time it happened, my mother reached over and held his hand, and Chloe and I looked at each other like witnesses to a moon landing. My mother. We have lunch, just us, first Tuesday of every month, and it was my invitation. And here is the part you have been waiting for, friends. What I decided to charge her. The bill is this. She has to bring one thing every lunch, one thing she checked herself that month, a price, a rumor, a story someone told her, anything, one thing she looked at with her own eyes before repeating. That is the whole tab. And she pays it, friends. Some months it is small. I called the pharmacy myself about the generic. They were wrong. But last spring at our lunch, my mother put down her fork and said, your aunt told everyone that Chloe's Evan got passed over at the clinic, and I called Chloe and asked before I repeated it, and it wasn't true, and Becca, I did not pass it on. And she said it, friends, with the exact shy pride of a kid holding up a spelling test, 61 years old, learning to look, doors and centimeters, you hold them with your foot and you wait. And Chloe. Sunday before last, my sister showed up at my apartment with tacos and a laptop, and she put the laptop on my counter and opened it to a spreadsheet, and I said, what is this? And Chloe said, our budget. Evan and me. Teach me to read it the way you read it. Not because I don't trust him, because I do, but because I am never again going to be a woman who doesn't look at her own numbers, and you are the person who looks, so teach me. And we spent the whole evening in that spreadsheet, friends, two sisters, one couch, one laptop, exactly like the seating charts and the dresses, except this time the thing we were planning was the rest of our lives, and nobody will ever hand either of us a curated story about the other one again. We have a rule now, Chloe and me, and it is the last lesson of this whole story, so take it with you. The rule is one sentence. We compare notes. That's it, friends. Somebody tells me my sister is upset with me, I call my sister. Somebody tells her I said something, she calls me. The firewall never gets built again, because the two of us decommission the whole architecture, and I want you to hear the mechanical truth one more time, because it will save someone watching this. The move is always don't call her. The answer is always call her. Every time, every family, and me. I still work from my couch in leggings with my hair in a bun, friends, still billing my little contracts, and last month I signed the biggest one of my career, and do you know what my father said at Sunday dinner when it came up? He put down his fork, and he told the whole table, my cousin, the aunts, everyone. He said, Becca runs the most successful business in this family, and has for years, and we were the last to know because we liked our version better. Ask her about it. Ask her real questions. And they did, friends. For the first time in 27 years, my family asked me real questions about my actual life, and I sat at the grown-up end of the table and answered them, and it only cost $38,000 and one red folder, and honestly, friends, I have audited worse deals. Oh, and Aunt Robin. You did not think I would leave you without the Aunt Robin coda, friends. The Sunday after the wedding, once the real story had finished its lap through the family, my phone buzzed, and it was the Tribune of the group chat herself. And the text said, and I quote it complete, because symmetry deserves the full record. It said, Becca, honey, I owe you an apology. I passed along things I never checked. Your mother told me her version, and I ran with it because it was easier, and I have been thinking about what you said. About asking someday, so I am asking what really happened. And friends, I looked at that text for a long minute because the exiled part of me had a draft ready, 3 paragraphs, footnoted, devastating, and instead I called her. Voice, not text, because the whole war had been fought in curated writing and the piece deserved a human sound, and I told my aunt the true story, the whole shape of it, for 40 minutes. And she was quiet in the right places, and at the end she said, well, I owe you about 15 years of benefit of the doubt, honey. I'll pay it as it comes up. And she does, friends. She actually does. Last month, somebody at a cousin's barbecue started a sentence with, well, you know how Becca is, and I was not even there. And I am told Aunt Robin put down her potato salad and said, no, actually, tell me how Becca is. I'll wait. And the sentence died right there on the patio, friends, no survivors. And when the story got back to me, I laughed until Chloe demanded context, because a firewall only works until one aunt with a loud voice decides to start checking things, and I had accidentally recruited the loudest one in the county. And yes, Dale's grandson got his lawn care website. I built it in an afternoon, mobile-friendly, little before and after photo slider for the hedges, the works, and when Aunt Robin asked what he owed me, I said, tell him it's free, but he has to put one line in the footer. The footer of that lawn care website, friends, to this day, in small gray letters says, Cite by the complicated one. Aunt Robin laughed so hard she had to sit down on her porch steps. Family repair does not always look like tears at a rehearsal dinner, friends. Sometimes it looks like an inside joke installed in the footer of a lawn care website, load-bearing, in small gray text, where the whole internet can see it and only 2 people can read it. Take the wins in whatever font they come in. Last month, Chloe and I went back to the chain restaurant. Her idea. Same booth. We made the hostess check. the actual booth where two lunches 11 days apart almost ended us, and we ordered the breadsticks, and my sister raised one at me like a glass, and she said, "To the girl who reads the paperwork." And I raised mine, and I said, "To the woman who saved my seat." And we ate the whole basket, friends, every last one, in the exact booth where they tried to teach us we were each other's problem. Turns out, we were each other's proof. So here is the whole story in one line: whoever needs it tonight. They didn't ban me because I would ruin the wedding. They banned me because I would understand it. And friends, hear me. If a family, any family, ever removes you from a room and tells you it is for the sake of the peace, look very hard at what they are doing in that room. The people who get uninvited are almost never the drama. They are the audit. Be the audit. Keep your receipts, keep your softness, keep your sister, and when the knock comes at 7 in the morning, and it will come, answer the door with your folder in one hand and your heart in the other, and be the one thing they never budgeted for. Both.